What's happening, fight fans? Ryan Thomas here from the Thomas Take Sports Podcast with a little bit of UFC action taking place tonight. I felt the need, of course, to hop on the podcast today and give you my UFC 297 main event preview and prediction. It's been a while since I've been on the podcast to give you guys a UFC fight prediction. Better late than never. So let's get right to it. Main event tonight, Sean Strickland versus Dricus De Plessis. What is on the line? The UFC middleweight title. The 185-pound title belt is on the line. And who has held that belt in previous years? Israel Adesanya. Of course, you have Anderson Silva, that era, as he held that title. Chris Weidman, good friend of the show as well. You have Luke Rockhold, Michael Bisping, and, of course, in my opinion, the GOAT, George St. Pierre. George St. Pierre, Ryan Thomas here live saying George St. Pierre is the GOAT of UFC, is the GOAT of mixed martial arts. So with that being said, let's get right down to it. Of course, for all your combat sports coverage, you can follow along the Thomas Take Sports Podcast right here on YouTube for fight predictions, pre- and post-fight reactions. You can listen to myself play MMA Matchmaker after fights are completed. And, of course, once you guys tune into this podcast and you're wondering what's going to happen next, I like to play the what's next game and finding out who's next, who could be upcoming, who could be the next contender for the winner of this fight, Sean Strickland versus the challenger, Dricus De Plessis. So let's start off with the preview portion of this podcast and explaining to you guys where my head is at heading into this fight. Now, Sean Strickland pulled off one of the biggest, if not the biggest, upsets in UFC history, beating Israel Adesanya, not just beating Israel Adesanya, but beating Adesanya in the foreign fashion that he did was, safe to say, remarkable, right? That was a huge achievement to be able to put that performance together when nobody could virtually put a performance like that together against Israel Adesanya at any turn outside of Alex Pereira. But Sean Strickland did what he needed to do to win that fight and then some. That was as easy a fight to decide, as easy a fight to score. That was, I thought it was 5 rounds to none. One judge had it 4 rounds to 1 for Strickland, of course, but I thought it was 5 rounds to none. I thought Strickland won that pretty easily, right? But I will tell you that in that moment of Strickland going from challenger to champion, we've seen it time and time again, guys that worked really, really hard to become that number one contender. They work extremely hard knowing what's on the line to become the champion. And once that is achieved, it's a much different career after that. Once you're a champion, sometimes guys don't feel as necessarily fulfilled as they did when they were in that pursuit of the title. Once they get that title, who do they become after that? Rashad Evans has talked about that. He said, what did I really have left in my career once I became the champion? That was really it. And I wasn't really as vigorous, a hungry as a fighter is the word I'm looking for, to put himself to that next level as a champion. He didn't have that hunger, he didn't have that drive anymore. It's the whole Rocky III scenario where you become a champion, former challenger turned champion. You lose that drive, you lose that hunger. Do I sense that with Sean Strickland, though? I do not. I see Sean Strickland as a true north-south fighter. There's either very little southward movement. He's a straightforward, comes right at you, just loves to fight. Sean Strickland is not this regal champion that's well-rounded. He's not this regal champion outside the octagon either. For obvious reasons, personality-wise, is a little bit of a wild card, a little bit of a Rubik's Cube of a human being. That's what makes him appealing. That's what makes him a draw. That's what makes him exciting to the fight fans and fight fans all around the country. Right, all around the country, they know that Sean Strickland is somebody that they know that can tune in and watch, that can tune in and know that Sean Strickland is a fun fight. He is a fun fight. He will bring it. There is no trepidation watching Sean Strickland out there in the way he competes. On the flip side of that, the challenger Dricus De Plessis, he's a surging contender. And I say surging, he's beaten every who's who that he could fight. Anyone that they've put ahead of him, he's beaten them. And he's done it in extremely impressive fashion. And he's done it in a form of fashion that I think makes a lot of people believe, myself included, that potentially he could be the next big thing at the 185-pound weight class for the UFC. So this is the first time in a long time that we're talking about a middleweight title fight that features neither Israel Adesanya, Michael Bisping, or George St. Pierre. That was November of 2017 was the last time that title kind of, went and or Robert Whittaker for that matter. So it's been a long time. And to have this era of the UFC in this new era with these two fighters here, Champion Sean Strickland and challenger Dricus De Plessis, I really do believe that this is the best matchup at the best time in this division for the UFC. This middleweight division's needed some fresh matchups, and this is one that the fight fans have been waiting for quite some time. It's not a matchup we ever thought we'd need to decide a champion because nobody was giving Sean Strickland much of a chance heading into his bout against Israel Adesanya, but here we are. Strickland, De Plessis, and leading up to this fight, we've seen a lot of banter. We've seen a lot of trash talk, wondering how that will affect or will it affect this fight. Safe to say that if the trash talk doesn't affect the fight, it will definitely affect the future trash talk or lack thereof that we might see from these two guys, because both of these guys took it extremely far in terms of how to offend one another, how to get under the skin of their opponent. And I'm really curious to see if that plays a factor leading into this matchup tonight. Could one of these guys or could both of these guys come into this fight with far too much emotion? But getting to the fight, looking at both of these fighters, I do see Sean Strickland as a tough, durable fighter that I'll never look past or never, overlook ever again. This guy went in there with Israel Adesanya. He took it to him. That tells me he could go in there with anybody and take it to him, right? Israel Adesanya's, at the time, pound for pound, number one. But I do believe that there was a lot of reasons to believe that Sean Strickland was not going to beat Israel Adesanya. And that's due to the fact that Sean Strickland, while his skill set is tough to put a finger on, his defense is very tough to penetrate, there is a matchup out there that can greatly expose Sean Strickland. We've seen it with Alex Pereira, who's now the UFC light heavyweight champion. But Dricus De Plessis, to me, if I were to look at, okay, who's the next new era fighter? Who's the next guy that can really be that contributing factor to, this next era of fighter? That's Dricus De Plessis. I wasn't overly impressed with Dricus prior to his bout against Robert Whittaker. I really didn't think much of De Plessis. Wasn't really overly impressed with his performance against Darren Till. That's the one that jumped out to me that, I just thought I wasn't really impressed with that. I really didn't think much of that performance. Derek Brunson, he was kind of on the outside looking in within the UFC anyway. So that knockout victory that he had prior to that fight with Darren Till, I wasn't really overly, impressed with that. But looking at the fact that he did beat Robert Whittaker, and not only was it in his last fight, but it was a finish. Second round TKO finish. Not many people finish Robert Whittaker. You got to be a really special guy to finish Robert Whittaker. He's a solid fighter, former champion in his own right. So, and it was a very awkward fight where it appeared as if Robert Whittaker knew that he was in there with somebody that he didn't expect to be in there with, in terms of the skills that you watch Du Plessis in the highlight reel. That's one thing. Then stepping in there with him, it's a whole other ordeal. And I fear for Sean that if he tries to move too far forward too early, this fight could end early. If this fight is a slugfest, that's the wheelhouse that Sean can thrive in. If Dricus is not throwing the hardest strikes early, he's trying to pace himself a little bit. The longer this fight goes, I do believe it could heavily favor Sean Strickland. But these guys have done all the right things to sell this fight. They've shook on the fact that this will be a slobber knocker, a match to the death. Sean Strickland brought that up in the press conference yesterday, and to me, that was no coincidence. Sean Strickland wants this fight to be a back-and-forth fight, to be one that sees both of these guys leaving the octagon, potentially being carried out of it or on a stretcher. That's the fight that Sean Strickland wants, because that's a fight that he can win. And really, I see that as his only path to victory in this sort of slobber knocker type fight, much like Strickland's last fight with Israel Adesanya. It was just that Strickland fought a little bit more cautiously, knowing that the title was on the line for him, knowing that he was outpointing the then champion Israel Adesanya. I don't see this being a point fight from Sean Strickland. I see this being a fight where he wants to go out and make a statement that was no fluke, him beating Israel Adesanya in the form and fashion that he did. He wants to maintain and solidify his status and his ability as a fighter, because I've even caught myself doing it even in this podcast today, kind of overlooking Sean Strickland. I'm not going to do that. I do see this being either a very, very close fight or a Dricus Du Plessis knocking out Sean Strickland. So if you're going to ask me who do I see knocking out the other, which guy do I see getting a knockout victory potentially, I see that being more Du Plessis than Strickland. So if I'm picking, I'm going with the title changing hands, Du Plessis winning this fight via finish, if he fights the right way. If not, then I could see this swaying in Sean Strickland's direction. But fighting the right way, to me, if I'm Dricus, is to really go after Sean early. Really try to hurt him early while you're fresh, while your air's in your lungs. And I think that could be what could really help Dricus Du Plessis close out the show in this bout and take home that UFC middleweight championship. So I'm going with Du Plessis in this fight. I don't know where the odds stand right now, but I do believe Du Plessis can get it done. With that being said, I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast live on YouTube as well as X. Of course, once the action wraps up, please feel free to hop back on my podcast tomorrow as I give my post-fight reaction to this fight, as well play a little bit of UFC matchmaker and come up with who's next for the winner of this bout. Thank you so much for tuning in, and of course, enjoy the fights tonight, and of course, stay tuned in the future.